I'm going to take you through the step-by-step process that I use to get my shrubs or trees off to the best start on the path to becoming bonsai. Hi, I'm Darren and welcome to the DIY Bonsai Challenge, the online community aimed at guiding you through the process of creating a bonsai tree from an ordinary tree or shrub from a garden centre or nursery. If you haven't already joined the Facebook group, head on over and search for DIY Bonsai Challenge. I'll also place a link down below. Pruning your tree or shrub for the first time might be a bit daunting. You might have all these long branches. To start with, I'm going to take this out of the pot so that you can see at home what's going on a little bit better. And while I do that, have a look at what we've got in front of us. And I want you to write in the comments or in the chat the major differences that you can think of between what we've got here in front of us and the typical bonsai tree that we'd like to create. Being careful not to break any branches. I'm just going to give the pot a tap. Hopefully it's going to come. There we go. I'm not actually doing anything with the roots today. It's purely to get that pot out of the way. This tree wants to fight me, I think. There are several key differences between what we've got here and a typical bonsai tree. The size of the pot is an obvious one. We haven't got those foliage clouds or pads that make up the canopy of a bonsai. But I think the most significant difference is the sheer size of this thing. It's pretty rare to see bonsai this big. So what we really want to do today is reduce the size of the tree to a more bonsai compatible form. You might be looking at your material and thinking, well, yeah, that's fine, but where do I cut to? How big should it be? So what we need is some guidelines or a solid foundation upon which to build our decisions in order to create our bonsai. Bonsai trees have several features that contribute to a convincing appearance as a bonsai tree. There might be dead wood or interesting shapes in the canopy, a curvaceous trunk maybe, or even those roots that look like they're gripping the ground and have been there for decades. The most significant factor, however, is all to do with how we perceive the world around us. Over the years, we've been seeing trees in the landscape and we've built up this preconceived idea of what a tree looks like. And sure, a tree has got a trunk, it's got branches, it's got foliage, it tends to be in the ground, sometimes it's got fruit. Today, we're actually most concerned with scale. So how long the branches are, how big the silhouette is in relation to the rest of the tree. And it's the trunk that leads this dance in convincing the eye that what we're seeing isn't just a shrub in a pot or isn't just a potted plant. Actually, this is a bonsai tree, which is, in its essence, a tree in miniature. And it's that miniature point that differentiates bonsai from normal plants. So how do we convince the viewer that what we're looking at is in fact a miniature tree? The size and shape of the tree's silhouette and its branches are most convincing when they are in proportion to the size and the shape of the trunk. So it's the trunk that we've got in front of us which is going to form the basis for how we decide what and where we remove. One way that we can reason about this is we're going to remove everything that isn't part of our future bonsai tree. But we're going to need a way to decide what is and isn't part of our future tree. And it's that scale and proportion that's going to help us work our way through this mess of branches and figure out exactly what we're going to cut off and what we're going to keep. So what is it about the trunk that helps us to make these decisions in the branches? As it happens, there's a guideline that will help us use the trunk's dimensions to guide our decisions in the branches. And that guideline is to look at the relationship between the trunk's thickness and its ultimate height, or the height we'd like it to be when it's our finished bonsai tree. In order to create a convincing bonsai tree, a good starting point to decide the height based on the thickness of the trunk is to take the diameter of the trunk and multiply that by 6. Once we know approximately how tall the trunk might be in the future, we can then work out from there to decide where to cut our branches and which ones are even going to be needed in the first place. Okay, let's have a look then. So the diameter at the soil level is about 3.5 centimetres. That makes our target height 21 centimetres. So that's going to be the top of the crown, that approximate level. The 1:6 ratio isn't a law, it's not set in stone, but it's a good starting point. If you want to create a more elegant tree, you might go taller, or if you want to represent a more powerful looking tree, you could go shorter. With a broadleaf tree, I'm going to imagine a 21 centimetre dome from the top of the soil. For the initial cutback, I want to stay well outside of this 21 centimetre dome to give myself a margin for error in case I change my mind at any point. Just on the basis that you can cut more off, but you can't cut back on. The timing of work we do with a plant to train it as bonsai is really important. We have to work with the plant's rhythms when it has the energy to recover from these operations. This work was carried out in the autumn. Another good window is the spring, but I'm showing you this pruning now so that you can get a feel for what you'll need to do with your trees when the correct window does come along in the springtime, just when the tree's starting to wake up from dormancy. So I'll start at the bottom. I'll cut all of these shoots like so. That's that branch cut back. Now up onto the next one here. I'm just going to work my way up the tree like so. Let's get this one cut back. It's getting a little bit on my nerves a little bit. Just get it right out of my face. There we go, that's better. With a broadleaf tree, we're going for a dome shape, but if we were looking at a conifer, not only would I potentially choose a different approach to this pruning, but we'd also look at more of a conical shape or triangle shape. This section here is actually dead. Now that I've got much better access, we can come through the tree and do some cleaning. We'll prune out dead branches, awkwardly growing branches that definitely aren't needed. We'll clean out some moss, get rid of any weeds, and just generally familiarise ourselves with the structure that the tree's got. Notice how we've reduced the length of the branches, and so they're much shorter in proportion to the size of the trunk. But we're still way outside of this 21cm guideline. And although it does look more tree-like, it still does kind of look like a bush. Even if we did some more pruning and wiring to shape the canopy a bit better, because of the proportions of the canopy compared to the proportions of the trunk, it's still going to have the feel of, at best, an immature tree, or essentially what it is, a shrub. Now next, what I would normally suggest to do is to look at the best base, line of the trunk and any features that it's got to decide which would be the preferred front viewing angle. But because we can't see the roots, they're buried under the soil and moss here, and I'm not going to dig them out at this time of the year. We really need to see the base to make that decision. We can't see the roots. We'll make the choice on which is the front when we do the first repot. But we're still not done today. We're still well outside of this 21cm silhouette, so I think we can make some more pruning choices. This side branch here is really straight, doesn't have any features, so I can cut that back. And I'm always looking for some leaves to cut back to. Don't want to cut back to a bare branch if we can help it. Cut this one back to a couple of side shoots like that. Same here. Got the profile of that branch as well. Get right in there and take this one back. This branch has got some nice side shoots, but it essentially goes on straight for quite a long time, so let's cut that back as well. That's nice. Cut this apical piece back to a side shoot. And this one here is actually coming from this branch. Let's cut. I need a bigger tool to do this one. Find some leaves to cut back to. There we go. And then we've got this kind of like, this sub trunk here is just going straight up into the air. Far too long. Can take that one off. Right, so if I get my ruler, now we're very close to the 21cm guideline. And I hope you agree that the proportions of the branches compared to the trunk, much closer, and it also, yes, still messy. No, it doesn't have the pads of a bonsai tree. Hopefully you don't have to look very hard to make out the structure of a tree in this material now. Having done this pruning work, the tree will produce lots and lots of buds and new shoots all across the branches, and it's with those shoots and branches we will create the branch structure of our bonsai tree. There are some areas on this tree that have multiple thick structural branches coming from one spot. And normally what you would do is you would make a choice on your trunk line and then remove the pieces from those bunched up areas to leave just the trunk and one branch. So you go from 3 down to 2 at each junction. And the reason we don't like more than 2 pieces of structure at the same location is because the junction thickens and it gives us what's called inverse taper. Trees in nature tend to get narrower as they go up the trunk. So if it gets wider as you go up, generally speaking, that leads to a less attractive trunk line. Now I'm not going to do that here today because I don't yet know exactly what I want for my trunk line. There's too many options to make the decision without knowing what kind of features we've got under the soil. Instead, I'm going to leave those options to make the decision at a later date when I do the repot. If you do know where your front is, if it's glaringly obvious, what you would do is you would decide on the line of your trunk. I could go up here, and then this way, or maybe I could go here and this way, or maybe this is the line of my trunk up here. And then here we've got a group of 3 at this junction here. 1, 2, 3, all coming from the same spot. I would choose which is my trunk line, which is positioned as the best branch, and then I would remove the third, whichever it would be. Around the back here, we've got a thicker trunk here, we've got this branch coming out here, and then this branch. So I might choose this section to be my trunk, this one to be my branch, and then I'd remove this third piece here. So we've only got 2 at this junction. In the coming weeks and months, I'll be making more videos explaining in more detail the timings and the additional steps required to go from this initial cutback to more of a bonsai tree. If you haven't already joined the Facebook group, head on over and search for DIY Bonsai Challenge. I'll also place a link down below. That's all the work for today until we've got a chance to look at those roots. If you have any questions relating to your trees, I'll be doing a Q&A session, so if you have any questions, keep an eye out for that in the Facebook group.